Welcome back to Reynolds Runabouts, everybody. This is Jeffrey Reynolds. As you can see, I was working on the dishing out process of a repair that I had to make after discovering it in the last episode that I had a gap that I had introduced in 2002 when I first repaired this transom with a brand new BS 1088 plywood core. I did not make a good connection between the new plywood and the old glass, which I had left in place both as a pattern and as a way to glue something to. Even though I had it fastened with bolts and clamps, I still had a gap down here about 4 inches wide and 1/16 inch deep that did not connect glass to plywood, and introduced a void that you cannot leave in there. Not only is the motor here, but there's a lot of through hole fittings that are gonna be just asking to let water in. I'll address that in a minute on how to do that, but this was my first step, is to get this dished out. And dishing out means you are taking, here's kind of where it stopped, and I'm going 2 to 3 inches, mostly 2, and gradually bringing that angle up slowly. So it's a flat angle, but on a degree or so, to make sure that when you put the glass in there, it's got a nice surface all the way up, and it feathers nicely at the end, which will allow me to do a better fairing job with not only the glass mat that I'll be putting in there, but then the fairing compound, which will then give it a smooth surface. So next step for me is to clean this up with acetone and start a layup that will allow me to rebuild this gap and move on to the fairing process for the rest of the hull as we prepare for paint. I use Eco Solvent from Total Boat. It's a really close alternative for acetone, which is rough to work with. I don't have to wear as thick of gloves. I don't have to wear a mask usually. If I have a lot of it on a surface, I'll definitely wear a mask. But it's a lot more friendly when it comes to just being around it. And it does a beautiful job. I've used it on this boat almost exclusively and have really been happy with the quality of the cleaning that it can do. So now I'm using the Eco Solvent or acetone, whatever you want to use, to wipe the surface that's been sanded and then vacuum. Always just trying to move dust and particles off the surface so that you can get a better connection between the fiberglass mat, the resin, and then in this case, plywood, paint, and existing epoxy layup that I did in 2002. And this will give you a good chemical clean so that you're pretty well assured that the surface has been cleaned of any solvents, grease from your hands, residual dust that I didn't get with the HEPA filter vacuum. And then it also will clean out the areas, because you have to do that with a cloth. I've got a lot of depressions, like right here, that I want to have super clean, so that I know that my thickened resin will go into those, and then I will start laying up my unthickened resin before I start putting on the fiberglass mat that I'll cut in thin strips and just start building up from the bottom to the top. Some people, and like what I'll be doing, I will go all the way out to the edge and with one piece, and then I make that the one piece, and my progressively narrower pieces are laying on top of that one piece and building up to the surface that I will then call the surface of the boat, which will be fair. Some people will go right down into the lowest area and build up like this one. Build up with small to large. And you could do that in this case because there's literally a gap here that I can adhere to. Some, like here's a hole. If you were to patch that hole, there's some theories that you start small and then you progressively get bigger. I like to go out from the largest to the smallest. I think it gives it a better surface all the way up that you can move off. And people will say, well, if it all comes off, it all comes off if you do that. Well, at this point, there's so much great fiberglass resin and mat being laid on there. I don't think that it's gonna pop off. I've never seen that yet. So it's really up to you what you wanna do. I've done both, had success with both. So it's really up to you how you wanna progress. There's two different schools of thought, and those are it. I went out and got some of my fiberglass mat that I keep in stock, and I had it for years. Keep using it when I need it. I don't, this came folded from the company I bought it from. You should be able to get it in rolls. And the reason why I say that is it doesn't break the fibers if it's rolled. So that's something you can look at when you're buying it. You can't buy it in bulk. You can buy it in bulk and rolls. It's hard to buy small batches that aren't folded. So it's just something you got to do. Maybe when you get it, unfold it and then roll it so you can keep it, best you can. And then I use a brand of electric scissors called Easy Cutter. These are fabric and fiberglass cutters. I've been using them for years and love it. So a whole lot easier to me than using large industrial shears. And they're battery operated. I've never run out. And you always get, with Easy Cutter, you get 2 batteries and a charger. I think for $100, it's well worth it if you're doing a lot of glass work. So what I did is I took the maximum measurement on the repair I'm making, which is 52 inches, and the maximum height was 7. So what I'm going to do is start cutting a series of progressively smaller patches from 7 and 52 downward. And even though this repair is a little uneven, I will probably get in there and do the tear away to form it more to the shape that I've created with the sanders once I get it on. It's quite easy to pull and tear this, which makes it a great fairing fiberglass because it just fares out so well into your final surface that you can fair then with putty and then have a great surface for painting. So this is what it looks like. You see how nice he's cut. And then I'll just go down here 7 inches. You can mark it or you can just eyeball it. Since there's so much of it has to be feathered, I'm just going to go and eyeball it here. So I'm going to cut some more of these and progressively smaller, and then I will have at least 4 ready to go for my glue up and resin, and then I'll let that rest probably for the day. You're not supposed to do more than 4 layers of glass or cloth or mat because of heat issues, and I find that to be a good place to stop usually because sometimes it will start to fall off. So even though you've got really good adhesion, got a lot of weight that you're adding with this mat, and get a peel away. So I'm going to go ahead and just do the 4 layer and resin rule, and then I'll come back tomorrow and do the final layup, and I'll show you that. I had to walk away from my batch of thickened resin, but I thought this would be a great opportunity to show you why you can't make your thickened resin too thick. So for instance, this has been cured. It's curing, so it's thick. So you figure, you know, that's a good drip, but almost too much. So what I did, I put it on my piece of plastic and I literally squeezed it down onto this, and it's not coming through. And here's an example of what's probably going to happen is it's just not going to adhere. So having that nice and wet so that it can get up into these fibers and not just pull that top surface away is very important. So getting it too thick is a bad thing. And I'm going to redo my batch so I have a really nice batch that's just wet enough and thick enough to do the job so I can put it on the transom before I add my first layer of mat. So I mixed my West System hardener and resin, and then went ahead and added my Total Built, this is the milled glass fiber. I always wear a mask when I do fiber or Cabosil fillers just because it's airborne, and I don't want any of that in my lungs, so I always use a mask. Once the fibers are, you can see they've been brought into the mix successfully, you know, you can take your mask off. I like working with epoxy because it doesn't smell, in my opinion, not bad. It goes over everything. It adheres to almost everything, including old polyester glass and resin, but also old epoxy resin and glass that all you have to do is rough it up with sandpaper and hit it with acetone or echo solvent to clean it, and then you're ready to go. So my thickened resin is just about perfect. It will allow the glass mat to absorb, but it'll also do some filling in some of the small imperfections I have on the transom that I want to fill, and it will provide a great first coat of resin that will adhere that first coat of glass mat well, so then I can go ahead and layer the other 3 layers on with unthickened resin epoxy and get a nice layup, and I can slowly get that get the air bubbles out of it and have a nice repair made to the transom. And then tomorrow I'll go ahead and put the last 4 coats on after taking off what they call the blush, which I'll take the blush off with either soap or water or with some echo solvent to get it opened up again, like if you want, and ready to adhere to that last 4 layers. So with the chip brush and my resin that's been thickened, I'm going to brush it into the gaps. The whole surface will get covered because you need to put a film on the whole surface. I'm going to make sure that I have my brush into those gaps so that I fill them and allow some of this glass fiber and resin to become a filler in that area. And then I'll go ahead and start laying in my pieces of glass that will then adhere to that. You can see that I've got multiple contours. This is where some of the glass, I took it right down to the wood, and then some of this glass was really good yet, and resin, so I've left that proud. So I'm going to have to really work in that first coat of glass mat will go on, and then I'll start working in smaller, skinnier pieces into these areas, and then in the end I'll probably end up coming back with some larger pieces to give myself a nice nice fair surface. It's a very unusual surface, so I'm going to have to attack it a little bit differently than just all the same. I'm just going to try to do as much filling as I can with different size glass pieces and get that back up to where it's fair. So this is what it looks like. You put it on, you want to cover out into that area that, you know, you took out with the, or I did, I took out with my sander, and get that nice and coated. Again, trying to fill in those voids. Like there's a couple that, you know, the sander went in a little too deep, or when I was using the oscillating tool, like you can see there, I left some areas that were a little deeper. Just so you know, I've got plastic under this, so I don't screw up my shop floor. So I'm just going to coat this all, you know, finding those gaps and making sure they're nice and full, so that I'm never going to have to worry about gaps in there again. See how I put that on there, and then I'm going to finish that up, and then I'll put on the glass. Now I am ready to add my first layer of fiberglass mat. So I'm going to position that on there, covering obviously the widest spots. And you'll see that this thickened resin has given me the glue that I've needed to put that first layer on and have it stick. I've got the thickened resin into the areas that I want filled. So I know I've got good filling there. I'm going to have to, as you can see, pull some of this a little bit. As I'm working it, I'll start tearing it so that I can get a nice fair surface up here where the paint comes back. So I've got that first layer down into the gaps, because this mat really is flexible and moves in multiple directions. It doesn't have the strength maybe of cloth 1708. It certainly doesn't have the strength of a woven roving, but for this application, really we're not looking for strength, which it does give you. We're looking more for that ability to put the transom back together layer by layer, adding strength to the wood, which is the real strength of the transom for the motor, and because it's technically part of the backbone of the boat, you know, the keel and the keelsons, stringers, and the transom make up the backbone of a fiberglass boat. You need to have this be really strong. So this is the first step. So now I'm going to get my unthickened resin ready, and I'm going to start applying it to this and feathering this edge, which is uneven at best. And then I will start to wet it out and look for gaps and holes and things like that that I can push the air out of as I try to get that first layer adhered and moved. You know, this will move into the gaps that I've created, and then go ahead and just start putting them on top. So I have the first layer on of the unthickened resin, and what I'm doing now, I'm looking for white white spots. Now they're going to be a little bit of white because there's thickened epoxy, so it's kind of white in composition. But every time I see like a white spot, especially in these gutters or deep valleys, I'm looking for areas that are white. That means that there's not enough resin behind it or it's not adhering. So I'm looking and I'm pulling. This mat is wonderful for movement. You can move it around with this brush. Like there, I found a valley and I just pulled a little bit and then I pushed it back in. And what I'm doing, I'm kind of pushing from the outside, knowing that that's where I have extra mat. I can push it very easily into these valleys and get those full. Get the air out, get the claw or the mat sticking. There's the air bubble. Pushing it out, but also filling the valley. I'm pulling it from the outside and I'm stippling with my chip brush. I can pull it and get enough mat in there and then flatten it back down. Especially this really deep valley that I had in the original glass removal. I'm just pushing it back up. It might be sagging a little bit from the the weight of the resin and the glass, but you just keep pushing up into these valleys, and it's getting harder as you're working with it. So it's helping you get the job done. But like I said, this mat is wonderful to work with on a repair like this. There's one there, and I think it's a lot more porous than cloth, and you can get more movement out of it. Like right there, I was able to move it around, and you just really can work it into a valley. And I think that's why some people are of the mind that you should fill from the bottom up, and I get that. I've done that. That makes sense. I do like putting on one complete piece to tie it all in from here to here to there to there. And then you could go in and then start filling this with skinny pieces. I've cut all mine already, so I'll continue to use the full piece method, but I'm coming in like a 1/4 inch on each piece, and I'm gradually stepping down until this will be one of the last ones. This valley will get a very small piece. So I'm backfilling it or filling that valley one way. Others will fill it skinny to full. I'm going to go full to skinny. But in the end, I believe we're all probably going to be pretty safe on what happened. And yeah, I'll just keep working on these valleys as they appear until I'm pretty sure it's done moving. You can see the edges I've feathered right up into the paint. The white is the original paint. I'm feathering that up very carefully. This will all get buzzed off with a random orbital, but I want to make sure that I have enough overlap that I don't have any surprises. Then I know that I've got a really great layer of glass and resin in there to keep the boat waterproof. I have spent many days applying fiberglass mat and cloth, specifically 1708 cloth, which has a cloth side and then a fiberglass mat side. So for the most part, I use fiberglass mat because I didn't have a lot of deep areas. The deep areas, for instance, that were down here, that went all the way to the inner core of the new plywood transom. That one I used a alternate combination of mat and 1708, just kept going back and forth till I got it to the depth where you always want to finish with 2 layers of mat at the end. That is an easier fiberglass. It's easier to fare, it's easier to blend into your existing surface that's already been faired or painted, So I ended up putting 2 layers of fiberglass mat in the end with resin, and I just got done sanding it. There's a few low spots, which I expected. You can only see so much when you're putting up glass and sanding in between that. It's just easier for me to go ahead and now fair that in. They might appear a little deeper than I would like, but they're acceptable for fairing compound, so it won't chip out because it's too thick. And so I'm gonna clean this up with acetone or Echo solvent, which is Total Fair's version. And I'll show you how I put on the Total Fair fairing compound by Total Boat. So that'll complete this video. Thank you for tuning in, and if you enjoyed it, I hope you'll hit the like button, and I'm hoping you're a subscriber. If not, use the subscribe button to get probably 2 to 3 week intervals now between the video. I'm going to be traveling again next week to the Sunnyland Boat Show in Tavares, Florida. And I've always wanted to go, kind of on the bucket list. Can't wait to go. I hope to do some video there as well that I can share with you, and also excite you to maybe go to the show or some other shows this summer, because even here in Michigan the sun is shining and it's warm, and we're all looking forward to the boating season. So thank you again for joining me this week, and I hope to see you soon.